My husband refused to sit next to me at his promotion dinner. "You're just a waitress, stay quiet," he whispered. But when I was introduced as the investor who funded the company, his face turned white, and my response left him stunned 3 days later. I remember the way the ballroom smelled that night, like expensive wine and artificial confidence. The kind that's only present when men in suits are celebrating themselves. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel in Seattle was glittering, full of polished shoes and polite applause. Everyone seemed to be shaking hands or pretending to enjoy the seared halibut plated in front of them. I stood quietly near the edge of the room, scanning faces until I spotted him, Claude. My husband of 22 years. He was in a tailored navy suit, laughing too loudly at something his coworker said. There was an empty seat beside him at the head table. I assumed it was mine. We were married, after all. But as I approached the table, Claude leaned toward me with that smile he used in boardrooms and airports, cold, calculated, performative. And that's when he said it. "You're just a waitress. Stay quiet. Don't embarrass me tonight." I didn't react right away. I think my brain took a second to register the words. I nodded slowly, then backed away, scanning the other tables like a guest who'd shown up without a +1. Nobody seemed to notice. Or maybe they did and didn't care. That's how these events go. I found a seat 3 tables back, near the marketing department, I think, and listened to the hum of conversations around me, trying to keep my breathing even. I should have expected it. Claude had always been difficult. Charismatic to outsiders, dismissive at home. He didn't hit. He didn't scream. He didn't cheat, at least not that I had proof of back then. But he cut deep with words. And I let it happen for years because I believed in the life we were building. We met in our early 20s working the dinner rush at Elliott's Oyster House on the Seattle waterfront. I was waiting tables, fresh out of community college. He was bartending, full of energy and ambition. He always had ideas, plans, dreams. I loved that about him. I thought we were in it together. When he left hospitality to get his MBA, I supported him. Took on extra shifts. Paid most of the bills. When he started working in tech and I stayed behind to open a small coffee shop, he never said anything outright, but his tone changed. He introduced me to his coworkers as Celia. She runs a cute little cafe. Never Celia, entrepreneur. Never Celia, business owner. Just cute. Small. But I stayed. Because we had a daughter, Hazel. And I wanted stability for her. For us. What Claude didn't know was that I'd quietly become more than a cafe owner. About 5 years earlier, I overheard Claude on a call with a startup founder named Julianne. He was trying to pitch a partnership, but they needed funding. Something in the way Julianne talked stuck with me. I looked into the company, Dynazen, on my own time, went through their pitch deck, and saw potential. I called Julianne the next day, introduced myself as an independent investor through CB Ventures, a name I came up with on the spot, and wrote a modest but impactful check. Enough to keep their lights on and get a prototype built. Over the years, as they grew, I reinvested twice more. Quietly. Strategically. Always through my business account. Never attached to my full name. Claude had no idea. He didn't even know CB Ventures was mine. I kept it that way on purpose. It wasn't about secrecy, it was about self-preservation. If he had known, he would have found a way to take credit for it, or worse, control it. So now here we were, his big night. The celebration of his promotion to VP of Strategic Partnerships. He had no clue I had been in meetings with the board 3 weeks earlier. No idea I held just under 6% of the company. As I sat at that table, swirling untouched Chardonnay in my glass, I watched Claude bask in the limelight. He clapped too hard when someone made a joke. He adjusted his tie every few minutes like he thought the cameras were on him. I kept wondering if this was the same man I fell in love with. Maybe he was. Or maybe I was just too young to see it back then. When the speeches started, I stayed quiet. waited. Julianne took the stage looking like power in heels. She started thanking people, engineers, designers, early adopters. And then she paused. There's someone very special here tonight. Someone whose belief in our mission came at a time when no one else would touch us. She never asked for recognition, never made a fuss. She just believed. I'd like to thank one of our earliest and most generous investors. Celia Barnes. My name echoed. Claude froze. I stood, smoothed my dress, and made my way to the stage. His mouth was open but he said nothing. I took the microphone from Julianne and smiled at the crowd. It's been an honor watching this company grow from a rough idea into something real. Sometimes belief isn't loud. Sometimes the people who make the biggest difference are the ones you least expect. Thank you. Applause followed. I don't remember most of it. I only remember the look on Claude's face. The way his hands twitched. The way he suddenly looked very, very small. I returned to my seat. Not next to Claude, but beside Julianne. He didn't come over. Didn't speak to me that night. Didn't come home until the next afternoon. And when he did, I was waiting. He walked through the front door slowly, like a man arriving at a crime scene he wasn't sure he could explain his way out of. Claude didn't say anything at first. He just stood there in the foyer, keys dangling from one hand, coat still on, looking around like the house felt unfamiliar. Maybe it did. Or maybe it was the way I was standing in the kitchen, completely calm, wiping down the already clean counter like it was just another Tuesday afternoon. You left early, he finally said, voice tight. I didn't look up. No, I left when the event was over. He blinked, like he couldn't quite figure out how to engage. You could have told me. Now I turned to face him. Told you what? He hesitated. That you were involved with Dynazen. That you invested. I tilted my head slightly. Would you have listened? He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. I didn't know. You could have said something. And what would you have said back then, Claude? When you were busy telling people I just ran a little cafe? When you were whispering in my ear to stay quiet so you wouldn't be embarrassed in front of your coworkers? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. If I had told him about my stake in Dynazen, he would have found a way to diminish it. Or spin it. Or claim it was a joint decision somehow. It wouldn't have been about my belief in the company or the smart risks I took. It would have become his victory, absorbed into his ego. He took a slow step forward. Celia, come on. It was a weird night. I didn't mean what I said. You know that. I gave him a long look. No. I think you did. There was a pause. He looked around, maybe searching for signs that this was just a temporary fight. That I'd forgive him like always. That we'd talk it out over dinner and sweep it under the rug. That I'd keep being the quiet wife in the background. But the rug was gone. The floor underneath had rotted. He just hadn't noticed. Claude walked into the living room and sat down on the edge of the couch, hunched over like someone waiting for a verdict. You're not actually mad about the dinner. This is about something else. Right? You've been distant lately. I stared at him. I had been distant. Because I'd finally started seeing things for what they were. The countless microaggressions over the years. The way he'd interrupt me when I spoke to his colleagues. How he'd use words like supportive and selfless to describe me, but never brilliant or capable or independent. And then there were the affairs. I didn't bring them up yet. But I knew. There was a woman named Rena, young, marketing department, always a little too quick to laugh at his jokes. Then a business trip to San Diego where he left his location on by accident. I'd never confronted him before. But I knew. Celia, he said, voice softer now. I was wrong. I didn't realize what you've been doing behind the scenes. I respect it. Really? I was just surprised. Surprised? I echoed, arms folded. Or threatened? He looked up quickly, then away again. His silence said everything. I walked into the hallway and returned with a manila envelope. Placed it gently on the coffee table in front of him. His eyes flicked down to it. He didn't touch it right away. What is this? You know what it is, I said. He finally reached forward and opened it. The sound of paper sliding out of the envelope was sharp in the quiet room. His eyes scanned the first few lines. Divorce papers. I haven't filed them yet, I said, before he could speak. I wanted you to see them first. To understand that this isn't a fight, Claude. It's a decision. Mine. He looked up, mouth open like he was about to say something, maybe argue, maybe beg, but nothing came out. Instead, he leaned back slowly on the couch, eyes wide and unfocused. I gave you 22 years, I said, voice steady. I raised our daughter. I ran a business. I invested wisely. And you still saw me as less. That's not true, he said, barely audible. It is, I replied. We sat there in silence for a long time. Not angry silence. Not tense. Just the kind of silence that settles in when both people finally understand that something's broken for good. He eventually stood up, walked past me toward the stairs, and paused. What are you going to tell Hazel? I turned to face him fully. The truth. He flinched a little, but he didn't argue. Just nodded once, like someone taking a punch he knew he deserved, then disappeared upstairs. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It was strange how peaceful I felt. Not numb. Not angry. Just clear. I woke up early the next morning and brewed coffee in silence. Listened to the rain tapping against the windows. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Or maybe it never did. Maybe it was always Claude's show, and I was just the stagehand in the background. Later that day, I called Julianne. Hey, she said. Everything all right? I hesitated. Actually, yes. For the first time in a while. We talked for a bit, about the dinner, about the shares, about what was next. She offered me a spot on the advisory board. Said the team wanted me involved more directly. I told her I'd think about it. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen staring at the backyard. The grass was overgrown. Claude always said he'd get around to it. He never did. I stepped outside in my slippers, pulled the rusted mower out of the garage, and started cutting it myself. The roar of the engine was deafening, but in the best way possible. Like something old and stagnant was finally being cleared away. By the time Claude came downstairs that afternoon, I had already finished mowing the lawn and was sipping water on the back porch. My hands were sore, but in a good way, the kind of ache that tells you you've done something for yourself. Something that no one else can take credit for. He opened the sliding glass door halfway, hesitated, and leaned against the frame like a teenager afraid to ask for the car keys. You didn't have to do that, he said. I didn't respond. He stepped outside and stood a few feet away, hands buried in his pockets, watching the wind ripple through the freshly cut grass. He always liked to pretend we were closer than we were by standing near me, but never too close. Never in a way that felt like partnership. It was more performance. Presence without intention. I didn't sleep, he said after a while. I took another sip and kept my eyes forward. I did. He flinched at that, again. Not because I said it in a cruel way, but because he realized he wasn't occupying my emotional space anymore. I wasn't spinning in circles over what he might be thinking or feeling. The performance was over, and there was no applause. I want to fix this, he said, voice low. I know I've taken you for granted. I finally turned to look at him. Claude, you didn't just take me for granted. You erased me. He looked like he was about to interrupt, but stopped himself. Good. I kept going. You spent years convincing yourself that I was small. That I didn't matter in the same way you did. Even when I made money, even when I opened a business, even when I paid for Hazel's tuition with my income. You called me a waitress like it was a slur. That was one time, no. It was every time. You just finally said it out loud. I stood and walked past him toward the door, pausing briefly before stepping inside. You want to fix this? Start by realizing you broke it. He didn't follow me. Instead, he stayed out there for hours. I saw him through the kitchen window, just standing there, staring at the yard. Maybe at his reflection in the glass door. I didn't care. That weekend, Hazel came home from college for a break. I hadn't told her anything yet. Claude hadn't either. But she knew something was off the second she walked through the door. She hugged me like always, but looked over my shoulder toward the living room where Claude sat stiffly on the couch. She pulled back and studied my face. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I nodded, but it wasn't the usual automatic mom nod. It was real. I will be. We cooked dinner together that night. Just the two of us. Claude stayed upstairs. Hazel didn't ask why. She knew not to push. She's a lot like me in that way, she waits, watches, listens. And when the truth shows up, she doesn't run from it. Later, after dishes were done, she curled up next to me on the couch. I saw that video from the Dine-A-Zen dinner, she said suddenly. I turned to her, surprised. You did? It was going around LinkedIn. I didn't know you were involved with them. I gave a small smile. I kept it quiet. She tilted her head. Why? I hesitated. Because your dad, he never really saw me as more than someone who supported him. If I had told him, he would have found a way to make it about him. I needed it to be mine. Hazel nodded slowly, processing. Good. That one word. Good. It almost broke me. Not because it was angry. Not because it was cold. But because it was solid. Quietly proud. She wasn't shocked or disapproving. She was relieved. Like something she'd quietly hoped for had finally come true. The next morning, Claude tried to act like nothing was wrong. He made coffee and stood in the kitchen like it was any other Sunday. Asked Hazel about her classes. Tried to pull on the role of dad like a jacket that no longer fit. But Hazel barely looked up from her phone. She answered him politely, but there was a distance in her voice. Something that wasn't there before. Maybe she saw the LinkedIn video and recognized how her father looked at me that night. Or maybe it was just instinct, our kids always know, even when we think they don't. After she left to meet a friend for brunch, Claude and I sat in the kitchen. I didn't offer him coffee. He didn't ask. I want to be honest now, he said. No more pretending. I looked up from my mug. Okay. He hesitated. There was someone. Rena. From marketing. I didn't react. It wasn't serious, he added quickly. But it happened. It's over now. I nodded slowly, then stood and walked to the sink. You're not surprised, he said behind me. No, I said. I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm sure you are. He exhaled sharply. Celia, I'm trying. I'm being honest with you. I turned back around. You're being honest now because you have nothing left to lose. That's not the same thing as being good. He didn't argue. That afternoon, I called my lawyer and gave the green light to move forward with the divorce. The papers would be filed by the end of the week. I didn't tell Claude right away. I didn't need to. He could feel the shift. I started spending more time at my cafe, and less time at home. My manager, Kamira, had everything under control, but I found comfort in the routine. The hum of espresso machines. The regulars who noticed when I changed the flower arrangements. The young baristas who called me boss without any irony. One of them, a quiet kid named Lynn, handed me a sketch one afternoon, something she'd doodled during her break. It was a stylized version of the cafe's front window with little vines and stars drawn in. At the bottom, she wrote, "This place feels safe." I almost cried. Claude tried a few more times. Little gestures. Offers to talk things out. Even suggested couples therapy once. I told him he could go alone. He didn't. Instead, he withdrew. Stopped asking questions. Stopped trying to pretend. I think he knew, deep down, that this was the beginning of the end. But what he didn't realize was that, for me, it was something else entirely. It was the beginning of everything I had quietly built, finally rising to the surface. The next few weeks passed like time through a cracked hourglass, slow in some places, lightning fast in others. Claude and I barely spoke. We lived in the same house, moved around each other like ghosts in a space neither of us recognized anymore. I moved my things into the guest room. He never asked why. Hazel went back to school after the weekend visit, hugging me longer than usual before she left. She didn't say anything about the divorce. I didn't need her to. The way she looked at me, clear-eyed, steady, was enough. She saw me now. Not as someone quietly supporting everyone else, but as a woman who made choices. 3 weeks after the Dynazen event, I received an invitation to attend the company's quarterly investors meeting in person. Normally, I joined via Zoom, kept my camera off, said nothing. But this time, Julianne personally called me. "They're discussing next stage advisory positions," she said. "And the board would really like your input. You've earned it." So I went. I walked into that meeting wearing a deep forest green blazer, no jewelry, hair pulled back, nothing flashy, just solid. Grounded. Confident in a way that didn't need to shout. Claude was there. Of course he was. He was still VP, still attending these meetings as a senior executive. But now, he looked at me like he didn't know which version of me he was going to get, the silent wife or the woman with 6% stake and a voice. I greeted everyone calmly, shook hands, and took my seat directly across from him. No glares, no tension. Just quiet confidence. Julianne opened the meeting with the usual financial updates. Then came the projections. The new contracts. And finally, the board's proposal for expanding the strategic advisory team, something I had privately pushed for months ago. "We're bringing in 3 new advisors," Julianne said. "And we'd like to formally welcome Celia Barnes to that group." There was polite applause. Not over the top. Just warm, respectful. Claude's eyes widened, but he didn't speak. I nodded once, graciously, and said a few words about long-term vision, legacy, and sustainable partnerships. When the meeting ended, people lingered to shake my hand. A few asked for a quick chat about my approach to community investment. I could feel Claude watching from across the room. He didn't approach. Not until nearly everyone had left. He walked up, straightened his cuffs like always, and forced a smile. "You looked comfortable up there." "I was," I said. He glanced at the door, then back at me. Funny how fast things had changed. I met his gaze. "They haven't. You're just seeing them now." For once, he didn't have a clever comeback. "I guess I didn't realize what you were really doing all those years." "You weren't supposed to," I said, picking up my leather folder. "You were too busy performing." He stood still, hands in his pockets, unsure of what to say. He looked tired. Not physically, but soul-deep tired. The kind that comes from realizing you bet everything on the wrong version of a story, and the narrator wasn't who you thought it was. I left without another word. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and launched the first draft of a new website. CB Ventures, Women Funding Women. It wasn't just about silent investing anymore. I wanted to give other women like me, women who were dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated, the chance to back ideas they believed in. I'd start small. Local businesses, female-led startups, service industry folks who had vision but no capital. It would be quiet power. But it would be real. Word started spreading slowly, through local entrepreneur groups, LinkedIn circles, whispers in cafes and co-working spaces. A few months later, I was invited to speak on a panel about women in venture capital at a conference in Portland. I accepted. Hazel came to watch. Claude did not. The divorce was finalized 6 months after the dinner. It was clean, efficient. I kept my steak, my cafe, and the house. Claude moved into a condo across town. We spoke only through lawyers and occasional texts about Hazel's tuition. He never fought me on the settlement. Maybe he finally understood. The last time I saw him was at a local tech mixer. I didn't know he'd be there, and I don't think he expected to see me either. I was talking with a few founders I'd backed through CB Ventures, all women, all thriving. Claude was alone near the bar, scrolling through his phone like he didn't want to be noticed. He saw me. I nodded politely. He nodded back. That was it. No drama. No bitterness. Just quiet acknowledgement. And maybe that was the most satisfying revenge of all, not screaming, not throwing glasses, not humiliating him publicly. But living a life he never thought I was capable of. A life he never saw coming. A life that wasn't built around proving him wrong, but simply proving myself right. Hazel graduated last spring. She stood in her cap and gown, proud and radiant. When she hugged me afterward, she whispered, "Mom, you're a badass." And for once, I believed her. So that's how the story ends. Not with cruelty. Not with fire. Just with truth. With grace. With me, finally, at the head of my own table. And Claude? Well, he'll always remember the night he whispered, "You're just a waitress." And he'll never forget the night the whole room stood and clapped, for me.